Fantastic. Thank you very much, Barry. Welcome, everybody. And as Barry already said, of course, it's the last day. So I'm very proud you came out so early, to listen. So as Barry said, remote video interpreting Indigenous languages. So this session will has two aspects. Indigenous languages, which is already interpreting into Indigenous languages is already a challenge by itself because of many aspects. But then also the remote video interpreting, which also interests. So there might be some, and also of those who are still coming, who will be interested in both. Some might only be more interested in the how did it actually work, the collaboration with Boostlingo, because we're using Boostlingo for this. So that's fine as well. So I think this is a very interesting session also for those in the industry who are not touched by Indigenous languages that much. But please ask questions throughout. So, because you probably have questions. Otherwise, obviously, there's time for Q&A at the end. And we see Canada is joining us this morning as well. So Barry was just saying Indigenous languages, Aboriginal, Australia obviously has Indigenous languages, but many of the other countries are as well. So what we're going to talk to this morning, a little bit of an introduction about the Queensland State Government contract, which sort of triggered this, a little bit about Indigenous Australia in general, of course what the challenges are, then I'm going to introduce the Yumplatok platform to you, how it is working. This is warts and all, how is it working with Boostlingo, and how the implementation of Yumplatok, engagement, training and maintaining Indigenous interpreters on Yumplatok, and the rollout of the statewide program from health to course, and then I'm going to show you just a little bit how do some Indigenous languages look like and how do they sound. And then hopefully we have lots of questions. So, Yum Language Services, we're an Australian language service provider. Our head office is in Brisbane. We have an office in Melbourne. We have a European office in Paris, and we have an office in Argentina. We localize into 250 plus languages, and this really is this is probably 265 now. There's a lot of languages that are always coming out. Australia is an immigration country, so it has a strong language policy on a state level and on a Commonwealth level, and so just to this, actually, this is actually a really important background. So I told you about the language policy, and migrants in Australia have the right to have access to their information in their own language, but Indigenous people didn't know they should be speaking English. It was easy, so that notion didn't exist. It started and we'll look at the map together, but this is something to be in mind. We also we obviously do interpreting, excuse me, cross-cultural training, subtitle voice over production. Background, in December 2017, we were awarded the contract. And this is the only time I'm going to read just a couple of figures to you so you can appreciate that. Who has been to Australia? Okay, wow, great. So the total landmass of Queensland covers 22.5% of the Australian continent, an area of 1,730,648 square kilometers, making it the second largest state in the Commonwealth of Australia. The total length of Queensland's mainland coastline is 6,973 kilometers. That's about 4.3 thousand miles, with another 6,374 kilometers. So almost 4,000 miles of island coastline. It's large, it's big, and remote video interpreting was really the only way to tackle this. It's the first time in history that in Queensland that all government agencies in Queensland can request Indigenous languages. So that was in December 2017 when they confirmed that contract, but that was it. I mean, that didn't mean, you know, there were a lot of interpreters qualified, so a lot of challenges. But let's have a look at the map, and it's a little bit small. So, so Queensland is, I'm not sure of the pointer, but maybe just point here. Queensland is that big part up there. And I would like to maybe give you the background that the northwestern part of Australia is called the Kimberley. It's a very remote area, one of the most hostile in terms of vegetation and remote areas in the world. The density of indigenous people and languages is, you know, very strong there. And 21 years ago, I was the director of an Aboriginal interpreter service in the Kimberley. And I started the Kimberley Interpreting Service, which today is Western Australian Interpreting Service. So there's the background. So to Indigenous, a connection, an emotional connection, elders who know me and remember me from that time. And that's very important in making this happen with Indigenous languages, because there's which we'll see later, a credibility factor of people, then you know, a big trust. So in the Kimberley, you have already the Kimberley Interpreting Service. In the Northern Territory, there's a government service for Indigenous, which is in Alice Springs in the center and in Darwin in the top end. And Queensland had nothing. And so because they thought they all speak English, and then they realized they don't all speak English, and then there was a notion, well, they should be maybe speaking English, until we finally came to, this is a cultural heritage, this is important, this is, let alone that migrants have the right to access of information in their own language, and Indigenous people surely should have that too. So, let's look at the challenges. This is Queensland, so again, you see the map, you see that large block, logistics, distances of over 2,000 kilometers, you know, and more. For interpreters, trust is a big issue. We're dealing with a generation of this people who have been part of the so-called stolen generation. There's a lot of trust issues. So trust will come up. We see the second one under, you know, the first one under technology with shame and embarrassment is also something we come up all the time. It's a cultural emotion, shame of not speaking, shame or embarrassment of having to ask for something. The notion of entitlement other cultures have is very different in Indigenous culture. So we dealt with trust. Technology, of course, shame, certified practitioners. So in Australia we have NAATI, it's the National Accreditation Authority for Translators and Interpreters. And we had 5 certified linguists, 5. And some more recognized speakers. So another big challenge to find the practitioners. Culture. Culture is, of course, paramount. A little bit to culture more. I have a note from my team, from the interpreters, from the project managers, who said in order for them to work with them, because it is so difficult to break down these walls and gain trust of interpreters or community members, Tamash, our head of interpreting, says, it was particularly difficult to gain the trust of women. I ate several bowls of boiled banana, and Thomas, another colleague, you know, he learned Lagaw Ya, which is one of the Queensland languages, a few words, of course, to be able to gain trust. They didn't have that. They didn't have 20 years of experience of having worked with Indigenous people. Tomas is French, and Tamás is a Hungarian, and so because you don't have you have people from different cultures suddenly facing our Indigenous colleagues in terms of interpreters. So there was a very big challenge for healthcare providers. the awareness. Suddenly the Queensland Government said there is now ability for nurses and for doctors to request an interpreter, but they didn't know that. It wasn't communicated. And it wasn't communicated because of many reasons. One was because they felt if they communicate to the press and to the media that now Aboriginal interpreters can be requested, well, people will say, well, why wasn't this happening before? So that was a real reality. So suddenly this was happening, but nobody was requesting interpreters because nobody knew. Patients didn't ask, no sense of entitlement anyway, and they also didn't know this was available. Additional administration tasks, false belief in successful communications for healthcare providers. They sometimes think, well, an interpreter, that's additional work, or they think because people nod, the patient understood. So we know that the false sense of communication is a problem. And for the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island speakers, unaware of the service or embarrassment that they even have to ask for this. So how did we deal with these challenges? We had to go, of course, outside of traditional sourcing of Ngati and Osset, own networks. We started a grassroots campaign to call for candidates for Queensland language speakers. But, this went through a grassroots, campaign level. People spoke to people, went out to communities, and just spread the message. This is massive. I would like to disclose from the beginning, this was a contract that now they can ask for interpreters, and we got the contract that we can provide them. That is if the miracle of an actual job happens, then we get paid. This was not a grant to set this up. So any investment time we put in was from us. So nobody paid us for this. So we can see we had new pilot projects. So we partnered with NATI, the National Accreditation Authority for Translators and Interpreters, and we ran a workshop in Cairns, which is on the Great Barrier Reef in North Queensland, and got, after the call for candidates, Queensland language speakers, we got those interpreters that already were working or were qualified to mentor them. Our team traveled up to show how it works, how it works, how the app works, how to accept a booking. You can imagine, so here we see Thomas, one of our interpreting team. He traveled up to Rockhampton. Rockhampton is in central Queensland. It's actually the cattle capital of the world. And he presented there on the platform, which we'll see in a minute. So it's a huge commitment. It is not it's not really a business case, in that. But this was the only way for us to get them engaged. We assist the Queensland Government now in designing its Indigenous language policy. We did a lot of internal testing. What we did find out, with timeframes, because the timeframes, they're on demand. The patient needs the interpreter now. In the past, this was a big problem. You need to pay urgency loadings. If you suddenly need to book an interpreter instead of scheduling the interpreter. Interesting. Now, it is much harder to get, might be harder to get in somebody from an Indigenous culture or from other cultures to commit on the 22nd of May at 10:30 to front up in court. Whereas the on-demand nature was actually quite intuitive, because they're already on the app, they're already there, if they are online, this is, of course. Well, and the call comes, it happens, the actual job actually happens. So that was one benefit. And the other benefit is Indigenous people have a complex kinship system, and there are avoidance relationships. So when I was running the Kimberley Interpreting Service, And we were flying and helicoptering in interpreter from Balgo. So many dollars later, just for the interpreter to see the person in court, she or he was interpreting and said, I can't, because there's an avoidance relationship and I can't be there. So the interpreting job didn't happen. So that is also, without the camera option, it has been much easier to do the interpreting jobs. So so how did we do it? You know, we saw the only way to tackle this is by providing video remote interpreting. It was the only way. And we decided to implement, and we looked around, and we partnered up with Boostlingo. So we're using the Boostlingo software, but we decided to white label it. So it's called Lingo in Australia, the platform. And we rolled out the Boostlingo platform as a primary interpreting management and scheduling system at 2M. We rebranded and white labeled it. We deployed the technology within, vendors and clients. We provided training content and created this, and the marketing, And I'll show you a little video. Now, this is not only, of course, for Indigenous languages, because we said, okay, fine, we will also do this for migrant languages. So my team just created a little video. So hopefully that gave you a little sense on, it is a unified platform, which means it has the scheduling and the management, but also the remote video interpreting together in one platform. And that was the reason why we chose the Boostlingo technology. So, Lingo, collaboration with Boostlingo. I don't know, how many of you went to the Boostlingo session yesterday? Fantastic, because this is not a session on the features. They have a stand, they're here. So you can, obviously, but you can ask me any questions, of course, how, all the questions you might have, how does it really work? Collaboration is the new competition, is really what I say. It's very important to note, TUM Language Services is a small language service provider, So for us, this was the only option. We don't have in-house developers. We don't have the financial resources to build our own system. Hence, we didn't even think, should we build or not? That was out of the question. Probably if I was a young startup guy, I would say no, of course, because I know some developers. So I don't say you have to have a lot of money to build your own system, but for us, no way to put that. And we didn't even know how this is going to work, what the take on is. It might last a year or 2 years, and then, so for us, it was a fantastic way to try something by taking a technology that already exists. Of course, you have to do a lot of changes. We're in Australia. We work we're not only using it for the Queensland Government. Of course, we're using it also for the AFP, the Australian Federal Police. We work with the defence sector. We work in the mining industry. cybersecurity regulations. So for starters, you can't have any of this hosted outside of Australia. So there we already had to get. Guys got a server in Sydney. So that data sovereignty is very important. So everything has to be in Australia. So we have the cybersecurity regulations dossier we have is this big. So that was challenge number one, but we did it. So, and I confirm that we do work with the Defense Department, with high security clearance interpreters on this. So, so that's there's a lot of very fantastic opportunities to use this in the mining and resources, oil and gas industry. When engineers are out on mining sites, they can, with their app or their tablet, request an interpreter, which of course, again, it's not some interpreter. For that scenario, we might have 5 specialized Spanish engineer interpreters who know exactly the topic. And then the client, when he's in the mining site, he will only see those 5. He won't see the whole list of 300 languages or how many they have. But they will only see, for example, or maybe only Spanish, and then so it's very easy for them to click, and only those, it'll only go and call those 5 interpreters or whoever is on call and we have rostered. So they're very different. You can be very creative in your deployment models. So that's something, France is building submarines for Australia. There are very few technical submarine experts from French, English, who are interpreters, and they're not in Australia at the moment. So we can have them, rostered in a time, so we know one is online if there's a delegation of submarine experts in Australia. So there's a lot of very interesting models of deployment. But how did it work? Of course, a lot of things had to be adjusted. We don't have VAT, we have GST. Tamash, our head of interpreting, has such a list of wish list which he sends to these guys all the time. There are these guys are Americans, the cultural issues. Of course, of course it would be easier if we could just call out to that developer at the end of the office. Can you change this? Can you do this? But they respond very fast. These indigenous languages are in there, so it's been, of course, what I want to say is there's no magic, Of course it can be frustrating at times. Of course you discover bugs. And, but what I've seen is, it is also, in this space, I don't think the perfect system already exists. But it's how much you put in. And this team of mine has put a lot in there. I don't know. I would like to give Dieter a couple of 2 minutes, or Brian. But just how is it from the Boostlingo, because you have to also, if you suddenly have, a client who just wants to change your technology, So, did you quickly want to say a couple of words? Yes. 2 seconds.
Well, first thing I wanted to say is thank you so much. When you start to build software and you have an opportunity to be involved in a project like this that has such a profound impact on Indigenous communities, it's such a wonderful opportunity. And to see how the technology can support these folks up there is just, I get a little misty when I think about it. It is a challenge, and of course she's right. Our development team had to learn very quickly about some Australian customs, ways of doing business. And any platform that you build is maybe 70% of it out of the box is going to be functional, and then the rest of it is going to be blood, sweat, and tears to make it conform to the needs of the end users. And I don't know if you want to add to that, I don't know. Yeah.
Thank you very much. There's blood and sweat, but it worked really well, and it is so. it went out. So then the courts heard about it, that the hospitals and in the health sector, they had it. And then they wanted to roll it out. So this is only in February. So very slow in the first year. If they want to have the reports of all these jobs that happened, there were not that many jobs that happened, you know. In the beginning we were happy, we had 1 a month, then we had 2, then we had, you know, a little bit more. But then the court said, can we implement it, roll out in every single court in Queensland? That is rolled out now. Now, doesn't mean they're all using it, but what also happened from a business, because of course we're all business people here, or most of us, they haven't, so it was rolled out on the 7th of February through all the courts to Lingo. They have been, and they started to book migrant languages as well. So whilst our contract is only for Indigenous language, but they like the ease, so we've been getting other languages through that. Yeah, that's good interpreter. There we have. Just a little bit on, this is, here you see the Kimberley in the northwest. Fantastic languages, but even Creole, K-R-I-O-L, you know, so that spelling. People think often in Australia, Creole is just bad English, but it's not. It has a very strong grammatical system of its own. You know, many words are from English, but it is a strong language in its own right. Here you see a little bit, this was for the telecommunication industry ombudsman, and this was, so you can see the ombudsman is the big mobile and internet boss. You know, or the telecommunication industry, a big boss for phone and internet, you know. So this is, you know, the translation into Creole, just so you get a little sense. We did this is an ATM warning, you know, we had the original script to tell them, you know, to protect their PIN when they go to ATMs. Adjusted the script a little bit, and I'm going to make you just listen in 2 Indigenous languages how this, you know, be careful when you use an ATM, don't give anyone your card or PIN number, they could take all your money, the bank might charge you a small amount, you know, instead of a fee, even for just checking how much money you have, don't use the ATM lots of times. So this is in Creole.
You want to be careful when you use ATM. Don't give anybody your PIN number or card. They can draw.
Oh, here we go. Not sure what happened there. I'll show you anyway, so you got a little sense. So that was Creole. So a lot of people think, oh yeah, I understand that, but sounds sort of pidgin-like, you know. But it has an own structure, and it's very dangerous. The word killing, I've been killing, means hitting, not killing. So you can imagine, you know, I mean, this is a whole workshop on its own, of course. This is the beautiful Kicha language I want you to listen to in the East Kimberley. It's very nice, and very nice what you hear, because of course everything is outdoors. This is the Bungle National Park, by the way. Everything is outdoors, so of course you're going to hear some birds.
Murmuru yambiri mandam yoriangam. Wan yambiri jabiri cardbo pin nambam yoriangam mandam boro yoro. Yimala bembere bo. From Pemberich Payo, Mandam, Molok Boboro, Tolngon Boboro, Warrowick, Mandam, Malagom. Mandam, the Kariamberenia, Bangian, ATM Ganagala, Little Bala Chop, Michinbo, Wangan and Mundabaro, Pat, Nilakumba, Till, Mandam, Chachi Memberin Bayo, $50, Wichi Bimberin Bayo, Mandam, Chiragum, Yujim Yamberija, Mandam, Mayamboro, Chiragum, Yujim Yamberija, Michinbo, Payam Yaran, Mandam, Chiragum.
Beautiful, isn't it? She's a wonderful interpreter who recorded this, and it's long, all to say, you know, what we say in our precise, concise English language. So, right, so my time is up. Yes. So yes, look, I'd love lots of questions, and I'm very, you know, I'm not guarded with, you know, information, how we pay, whatever, all these questions. You're very welcome to throw everything at me.
So if you could, Taya, you can use one of the mics there, and then where's our student volunteer? And you can use the wireless mic, And if you have questions, raise your hands and we'll get started. Right up here at the front table.
Naomi Bowman, DS Interpretation. Hi, Taya. Thanks for your wonderful presentation. My question is regarding white labeling Boostlingo. Did you customize with them any particular features? I'm not talking about semantics or labels or anything like that, but did you create any customized features that are exclusive for your white label in particular?
I mean, Dieter probably knows more. I would say no, nothing that is exclusive, only what is Australian specific.
So, I mean, a lot of things when we spun up the...
Could you use the mic, Dieter?
Oh, sorry. When we spun up the AWS server in Sydney, we had to obviously change date, time, formats, anything that's specifically Australian, currency, stuff like that. I think because the platform allows you to customize drop-down boxes and radio buttons, we've changed a few things in the interface.
I know what Naomi is. Naomi's. It's really not about. Your question was not about anything cosmetic, anything. Yeah. I understand that. Not even. It's feature. An actual feature. So. Yeah. From what I'm aware of, we don't have features which are only for us, which others don't have. And in terms of regulations. Yeah. We have, to make it compliant, to make some things compliant. For example, we can't yet, couldn't send out the invoices, for example, because they didn't comply with Australian Taxation Office, so the compliance wasn't there, and we're getting there slowly, and have had to found, sort of workarounds, because obviously we're connected and then to our accounting system. But I'm not aware of any features that we asked for that someone else, that are just for us.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm asking this is because are there other LSCs that are also trying to use Boostlingo, having watched your experience and knowing what's going on? What about I'm trying to figure out
in Australia.
In Australia.
Yes, no, yes. A very good question. There was another LSP in Australia who, and there is an LSP in New Zealand. I should say I'm the president of the ALC, the Australasian Association of Language Companies, so I do know the other LSPs in New Zealand and in Australia. And New Zealand based, they were already working with Boostlingo, sort of trialing, and an Australian one, which just for me, I don't mind this technology. If it's Microsoft or whatever you're using, we all use iPhones. The way we conduct business is what makes us successful, but not the technology, So for me, that was certainly not a problem. But that the other LSP stopped actually using it. So I'm at the moment not aware of another LSP. However, a lot of people are asking us, what are you using? Can we use? Can we talk to them? Of course. So I expect more Australian companies to take up Boostlingo, because they can see how it's working, and then they dare as well, because it takes a lot of courage. So yes.
My question was about invoicing and finances. So how do you charge customers? But as you said, it's not within the platform. But then how do you pay the interpreters?
Yes.
Are they employed or companies or? Yeah.
Yeah, they're freelancers. So for the Indigenous interpreters are all contractors. Theoretically, that one situation I painted before. An interpreter at a mining site, with the engineers, that potentially could have been one of our in-house interpreters, who is actually a project manager, but she's also a qualified interpreter, so potentially it could have been her. But otherwise, they're contractors, and then they get paid, because you didn't want to know the technical way how they're getting paid.
Not the technical way, but do you organize this on the platform or do you organize it outside the platform?
The payment.
Yeah, the payment and who's getting paid as a contractor, who's getting paid for 8 hours, and they take some bookings here and there.
No, that's the beauty. I mean, everything goes through that platform, so automatically, you know, the rates are, you know, they have underlying rates, and so if they take the call, then they get paid. Now, sorry? Is it per minute? Absolutely not. Oh my goodness, I would not pay for per minutes. We have minimum charges. Now, I don't say we'll never do that, and for certain other, you know, but for indigenous languages, I mean, if a call happens, I mean, you have at least, we've changed, so in the beginning it was a minimum of 30 minutes, just for making this, you know. The interpreter is available. I mean, we also recognize their availability. So I don't want them to be available to take, so even if they take the call and the call only lasts 1 minute, they will still get paid for 15 minutes. So that's, yeah, exactly. So there's 15 is the minimum for some, for others is 30 minutes. Yeah, just to, otherwise there's no, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm Michal from Lichi Translations. So what's the volume of the work?
The volume is still very small because it's only just growing.
Just started, yeah.
Yes, exactly. So whilst we did all this, you know, the grassroots campaign and get the capacity building last year, they're now kicking in. So now every day there's activity. Last year we had maybe 1 or 2 a month. And we had a little bit more, so so this is you know, ask me next year. I hope to be able to show you exactly those graphs, you know.
Thank you. Jeannie Bromberg and Associates, and Interpreter Education Online. My question is in regards to preparing interpreters for remote work, because doing on-site, doing remote requires very different skills. So how have you worked with your interpreters to make sure that they are ready for VRI work?
Yeah, thank you. Good question. With Indigenous, we didn't have this huge pool of interpreters who we had to retrain from face-to-face on-site interpreting. It's a little bit like our new university graduates who start translating and by post-editing and completely, you know, there's no training, you know. So for those, we are training now. This is how they learn the interpreting in the first place, on video remote. So this really, because simply, I said we only had 5 accredited in Queensland. So everybody gets the training, as I showed, you know, they travel up. So part of any interpreter training from the beginning is now the technology and the dealing with the technology, and of course how to do the video remote interpreting. So it's for them very intuitive. Now those interpreters, so for example for the Australian Federal Police, as migrant languages across the board, interpreters who have been interpreting for many years, and you might have that in the States as well. For some languages, the interpreters are actually older generation, because the younger generation are choosing different jobs. That's an issue, and we do testing, and then we see if we have to train them, and then my team runs a monthly training session with them. But to be honest, the ease of technology was more an issue than the actual video interpreting. I mean, I'm an interpreter myself, so I really know, you know, what I'm talking about. There is a generational, older interpreters, they just have an issue anyway with even accepting a call. So it's really something, you know, which we will see with all the new interpreters. For them, it will be just as normal as post-editing will be in the translation. So yes, we do training, but it's not always that successful. That's what I'm saying.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being, frankly, extremely generous with your experience and showing the ups and downs of being able to implement a remote interpreting system like this. So let's give Taya a round of applause.